Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Mahabhagavat Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Jai Sattam Goswami Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Jai Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Jai Srila Baladev Vibhushan Gaudi Vedantacharya ki jai. Jai Srila Vishnath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Narottam Srinivas Shyamanand Prabhu Treya ki jai. Arupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai. Jai Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami ki jai. Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Om Agina Timirandasya Gyanam Jala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantam Anapetyam Apeti Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tammayatayo Tarabo Vinidustam Sarvabhutam Munimanatoshmi Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Shiptascha Karmadita Rangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prabhana Brinde Namaste Charana Ravindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Varadram Tato Mamarasti Katyana Chapi. I first of all offer millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again millions of times unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord. Dandavat pranams. So we're working our way through this third canto. I'm attempting to capsulate in just 7 days all the third canto, and I'm describing it in the breakdown that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given in 6 stages. Can you remember? Yeah, the third canto, yeah. Yes, 4 chapters there. Yes, creation and subcreation. Sargo and Vishargo. 7 chapters there. Yes? Then Lord Varaha in another 7 chapters. Yes? No, then it comes back again to Sarga and Vishargo for 1 chapter. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes that a stage, makes that a topic, a specific topic, because it's reiterating, it's connecting it all together. Because first of all we had the questions, etc., and the establishment of Vidura, Maitreya, and Uddhava, and then it rolled through the creation and subcreation, and then Vidura was very anxious to hear directly about the avatars of Krishna. So then Maitreya speaks about Varahadev, and then he comes back again, though, to that principal topic of creation and subcreation, the creation of the twilight, etc. That's in chapter 20. I can remember many times looking for that episode to speak to devotees and never being able to find it, because you look in chapter 12, where it's about the creation, and then you've got Varaha, and it seems like it all stops, but then there's this extra chapter that comes in. So this is like the rhythm of the third canto, so to speak. And then? With Devahuti. With Swayambhuva Manu, yes, that's what we discussed yesterday. And then? Finally? Kapila's instructions. Yeah. So this is where we've reached. So actually it's very simple. So when you get them down like this, these 6 topics, it's like you'll never forget the glories of the third canto. It'll always be there, very clear. So we want to get that kind of vision on all the different cantos, all of them. We want to, capsulate them. So it's as if the canto is actually getting into the palm of our hand. It's very inspiring when you read, for example, Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas, I've said before, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, how they literally run up and down the Bhagavatam. It's like they know that they've got it right in their hand. And it gives a mood of accessibility. It's not just, for many devotees, I know that they don't even, dust it off the shelves in their life. The Bhagavatams are just sitting there. But to examine it like this, through this analysis, makes it approachable, makes it very simple, distinctive. So we can see, just like we went through before, the first canto and the second canto, breaking that down also, those 19 chapters in the first canto we went through many times, and then the 10 chapters of the second canto, but trying to see the whole thread, the whole breadth of devotion going through them. So now we come to this very exalted topic. This is the most special topic of all this third canto, these fundamental teachings of Kapila Dev about Sankhya philosophy, which is not an easy thing for some. For me anyway, it's not easy to actually enter into appreciating these explanations so easily. It's quite scientific. I don't have such a scientific, like Indupati Prabhu, by Krishna's grace, is here today, and he has such a good scientific hold on things. So I'm going to lean on him for some, help if necessary. But Kapila Dev is about to describe Sankhya philosophy, and the devotee who's been trained in our Sangha, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj's Sangha, perhaps are more and should be more interested in the Braja Leela, the Braja pastimes. This is where we want to fill our consciousnesses with. And we might think, why am I actually even, hearing about this Sankhya philosophy? But we should appreciate that every single word of the Bhagavatam, Gurudev has described not only every word, but every letter is the embodiment of Sri Radha. So nothing is separate from that conclusion. And if we also think of it like in the sense of the time continuum of this Bhagavatam is stretched out for many, many thousands of years. So some personalities are going to get great nourishment from this Sankhya explanation. Sankhya basically is controlling the mind through the understanding or analysis of the 25 senses, etc., or 26 senses, elements, and an appreciation and analysis of the material realm. This is what it's going to be described, the different aspects of that. So in a very analytical way, rather than how we have been taught by Srila Gurudev and from the teachings of the Rasa Tattva sections of Jivadharma, etc., that actually if the sadhak, he focuses on those pastimes of Krishna and desires to render service to those pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, then all these truths will be revealed to him. But unless we actually have this grounding, this is grounding work in this Sankhya philosophy actually, unless we have that grounded, then when these truths are gifted to us, manifest through to us, what sort of platform have we created to keep those truths? You may get a divine realization while you're chanting, but how to sustain that realization and amalgamate it into our daily lives, our daily existence. Without this appreciation of the Sankhya aspect, it's not so easy to understand basically I'm not the body. This is the first teaching of spiritual life, but we see so many elderly devotees, older devotees, who actually don't function on that platform at all. We know, and we should think within ourselves, how much am I on the bodily platform? This morning there was no electricity, cold showers, cold baths. It's the best way to get off the bodily platform, actually. If you jump into a cold bath, you have to tell yourself, I'm not the body. I really am not the body. When it's freezing cold and freezing cold outside, you have to say like that. How else to deal with these things? But how to come to this place of understanding that I am not the body. So this is what Kapila Dev is about to explain to his darling mother, Devahuti, who has been left by Kadama Muni, and she has begged fearlessness. So fearlessness is manifesting in the form of her son, Kapila Muni. And he's about to impart this fearlessness. Like there's an expression in English that if you're feeling very afraid, then you should access the fear.
You should see what is it that I'm actually afraid of. Sometimes, hormones or mental things start sort of really, making us intimidated by some situation. But actually, if you stretch it out and examine it and look at it, you have nothing really to be afraid of. If you examine it, if you take the courage to examine it, for example, if you have to speak on a stage in front of 2,000 people, and Gurudev is there, then that's the intimidating factor, actually. But then you should examine what is it that I'm intimidated by. If I'm not trying to please and serve him, then I'm trying to please and serve myself, and then I should be probably intimidated, because that's not what Gurudev wants. He wants us to represent his teachings, perhaps, to that crowd. So we have to be analytical to cross over the fear. So this is the fearlessness that Devahuti is begging. At the end of the last chapter we spoke about, that Kapila is saying directly to Kardama Muni, you are going to demonstrate fearlessness in the world as a sannyasi, and it's described how he travels without shelter and without fire. So Kardama Muni, by his own existence, is demonstrating fearlessness in the world. No shelter and no fire. Very explicit. And he's also giving this fearlessness to his mother in the form of the teachings that Kapila Muni is about to explain to her. So we have so many different avatars, different incarnations of Krishna, and most of them they're like for the Leela pastimes, like Nrsingadev, Varaha, Vamanadev, Parashuram, killing the Kshatriyas, etc. They're involved with like Leelas, principally, Mandara, the Kurma avatar, Matsya avatar. But Kapila, out of his causeless mercy, has come to give us these instructions for a purpose, for a reason. So never for a moment disregard them or think in any way that they must be inferior to what I'm going to get nourished from in the 10th canto. The two must harmonize, they must balance through. So this is just to put us in balance so that we understand, of course. It's like in this verse, Aradayo Bhagavan Rajeshat Tanayas Taddama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachit Upasana Braja Vadura Bhagena Vakapate Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pramatona. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence that's going to describe the Braja Ramanis, those most worshipable personalities towards Krishna that we are in the Anugatya of. So Srimad Bhagavatam, and that means every part of it. And when we look at the commentary of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he's so excited about these verses, which to us may seem a little dry or difficult to enter into when it's describing the different kind of senses, the different deities in charge of the different senses, etc. It can get a little tedious in some sense if we're used to these wonderful, very sensational pastimes that are described in some of the other chapters. It's very sobering. We need to be sober. We need to be grounded. And this Sankhya philosophy that Kapila gives is very grounding. It's very sobering. And then this will, as I said, give us a platform to sustain realizations that actually are gifted to us from the Lord. So I'm going to read some translations, because I want us to get an impression. It's not, I know that it's not very often, perhaps in our Sangha anyway, that we get to talk through the 3rd canto. It's not so regularly spoken on, and these instructions of Kapila Muni are not so regularly spoken on. Srila Gurudev, I only heard a couple of times speaking on these topics. Most of the time it was Prahlad Charita or Chitraketu or the 1st canto, and mostly, of course, it was the 10th canto. So I'm going to read some of these verses just to give us a taste for what is in. And my motive is to inspire us to take deeper shelter of the Bhagavatam, to inspire us to become attracted more to the Bhagavatam by the words of the Bhagavatam itself. So when Kardama Rishi goes away, then Sonaka Rishi, he starts to inquire from Sutta that he starts to glorify Kapila as the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And then Sutta Goswami begins to speak again, describing those qualities to some degree. And then almost immediately, he relates back to the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. Actually, if we link it throughout the Bhagavatam with these personalities, it makes it very much more simple, because that's like a constant thread. We have that continual thread through these different personalities. We start to see that. So then it becomes, again, more accessible. So now Maitreya is saying, this is in verse 5, that Kadama left for the forest. Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovar to please his mother, Devahuti. And actually in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, as I explained yesterday, it's described in the translation that at this point he took his mother's milk. I think this is quite significant to show the relationship. Actually, when you get right into Devahuti, she's the most wonderful personality. In such a simple, humble way, she's inquiring this knowledge from her divine son. Very beautiful. She's presenting herself as a very foolish woman, doesn't know anything. And this is the platform for the instructor to give some wisdom. If someone is in that very submissive, tadvidi pranipatena, submissive mood, then Guru can very easily, actually, he will be endeared towards us. There will be a physical chemistry between. I've often said the example like a son and a father. When the son goes and takes the father's money and buys a gift for the father, then this can endear the son to the father, so much that the father can really gift him something at that time in the heart region. So this mood is exemplified, we're going to see, by Devahuti. So then Devahuti begins to describe in the 7th verse. There's 5 verses here when she's lamenting and she's asking for this fearlessness directly. This is the introduction. This is making it ready for Kapila Dev to give. She's saying, I'm very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses, and because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. So I'm sure we can relate to these inquiries in our own way. Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental eye, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. So she's appreciating the enormity of the opportunity she's being given. We also, as we were talking yesterday, must daily, regularly appreciate the immense opportunity that we've received to be in Braj, to be under the guidance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to be hearing Shukadev Goswami's words, to be under guidance of a Rasik Vaishnava. How amazing is that in this dark, bewildering age of Kali, where everything is topsy-turvy, everything is upside down, everything is angry. It's like Didi was saying the other day, how time is crunched, in this age. We can't properly even stretch our consciousnesses because of electronic influence and motor car influence and, bad water and bad air and bad food. This is all affecting our consciousness. None of this existed in Satya Yuga, which is why they could live for 10,000 years, 100,000 years rather, because of that lack of pollution, etc. So we're challenged by all that. But at the same time, if Krishna sees one jiva has actually taken to this process, not only that, but is taking it seriously, is dedicating his whole existence, and even coming to Vrindavan, where there's no material facilities, in a sense, in relationship to what you would get in the West, etc. They're ready to give up all that and just remain here, just praying to Krishna for his mercy, chanting his name, performing the Yuga Dharma. How much mercy is Krishna obliged to give, reciprocate with that sincerity? How can he not reciprocate? She's saying, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of ignorance of the universe. This is like that verse, Krishna Swadharma Pachite, dharma janadi visaha kalona satri shamisha purana kodanodita. That this Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun. It has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna for his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Men who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of this age shall get light from this Purana. So this Purana is non-different to Bhagavan. And similarly, Devahuti is glorifying Bhagavan directly in front of her. So we can ask these questions. Oh dear Lord, I am covered by fog of ignorance. Please give me refuge. Yes, take the Bhagavatam, my dear child. And then all, clarity will be there for the consciousness. No doubt. It's the manual for material existence is this Bhagavatam. Now be pleased by me and dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have engaged in your maya and have identified myself with the body and the consequent bodily relationships. I just wanted to add something in this regard, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this is for our purification here, in Jivadhamma, he gives in the 7th chapter a very beautiful face-up contemplation of the size or smallness, depending on who we are, of our false egos. He speaks very beautifully here. He says, when the jiva enters material existence, he takes on a new type of egoism. This is totally relevant to what Kapila Muni is about to describe. He's about to describe the sense of I and mine in the sense of the false ego and how to purify that. So just to bring us up to speed, so to speak, here is a definition of the false ego that I may be thinking. In the conditioned state, he's thinking, I am a human being. I am a devata. I am an animal. I am a king. I am a brahmana. I am an outcast. I am diseased. I am hungry. I am dishonored. I am charitable. I am a husband. I am a wife. I am a father. I am a son. I am an enemy. I am a friend. I am a scholar. I am handsome. I am wealthy. I am poor. I am happy. I am sad. I am strong. I am weak. All these kind of things are actually the false ego. It's the false ego that's making that affirmation, that I am strong, that I am hungry, that I am weak, etc., etc. That is the false. For the soul, that doesn't apply, right? The soul is actually beyond all of these designations. So I think by hearing this, it gives us a clarity on what is the meaning of false ego, right? Now he goes further. The minus, this is mine. This is my house, this is my possessions, this is my wealth, this is my body, these are my children, this is my wife, this is my husband, this is my father, this is my mother, this is my caste, this is my race, this is my strength, this is my beauty, this is my quality, this is my learning. I mean, he goes on like this because we need to have it woken up and really appreciate how much are we on the bodily platform or not. This is my renunciation, this is my knowledge, this is my wisdom, this is my work, this is my property, these are my servants and dependents. The colossal affair that brings the conception of I and mine into play is known as samsara, material existence. So this Sankhya philosophy is an analytical way how to become freed from this samsara. That's what Kapila Dev is going to describe now to his mother. And it's describing after he hears her beautiful prayers. Then he begins to speak in the 13th verse here. The yoga system which relates to the Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. So Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, throughout his purports, is encouraging this path of devotion, this path of bhakti. This chapter is titled The Glories of Devotional Service. So it's not any separate, just because it's got a name like Sankhya Yoga or Astanga Yoga. The Acharyas are interpreting this as devotional service for us. There would have been, as I've described before, sadhus and sages present in that assembly who would have been looking for a yogic process, because he's going to describe about pranayam also, and sitting with, looking at the tip of your nose, etc., like in the sixth chapter. So for us, we're not qualified to practice that, and actually we don't even want to go that. But why is it here? Why is it part of this brilliant, illuminating Bhagavatam? It's to give us some analysis of this way how to control the mind and the senses. Without some sense of control over the mind and the senses, how are we going to be able to really dive into bhajan? How is that going to be possible? It's going to be fictitious. It's just going to be all kalpana, all our imagination. Then he says, O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. Now, the stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditioned life. So when the kala aspect and the jiva is impregnated into the womb of this pradhan, this material energy, then it takes on cohesiveness. This is what we've already described. And then the three modes of nature are manifested, which act on the senses of the jiva. These influences by the three modes of nature, we're surrounded by that. This is like a prison house for us. But when the same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. So either if we're looking at the material objects and looking with any flavor whatsoever for my own personal gratification, this is a very, very high platform. Really it is, to be that much detached. I think it is anyway. Unless you're already completely detached from all these things. We may to what degree are we detached from these influences of the material nature? Always this process is dynamic. It's always moving forward. So always we want to assess our situation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would say like this, that each night before you rest, have a look and see how much we have actually been on the side of devotion today, on the side of bhakti, in all my judgments, in all my arrangements, in all my activities. Have I tried to please Krishna, principally, and Krishna's devotees? Pleasing Krishna's devotees is paramount, because very quickly, after describing some intricacies of consciousness, etc., then I'm going quite quickly because I'm going to try and attempt to get through 4 chapters today. I don't think that'll be possible, but that's what I'm going to try. He immediately starts talking about association. These things can't be realized outside of divine association. This is like the Chatushloki of the Bhagavad Gita. Machchita madgata prana padayanta parasparam gatayantas chamam nityam pushyanti cha ramanti cha. That it's saying that in the 10th chapter, that those devotees who have surrendered fully unto me and are absorbed in me, they relish and take great happiness in discussing my pastimes and my activities. So this is the path of bhakti, to have that association where we can freely, liberally discuss these pastimes about the Lord without any fear, in a fearless situation. Not that I'm being intimidated, etc., by anything at all, but how can I discuss these beautiful pastimes of the Lord? And then it describes what is a sadhu in the same way that I've just said from Bhagavad Gita. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connection, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. So we want to find those sort of sadhus to associate with, to spend our lives with. And then he comes to this very beautiful verse which Gurudev would quote regularly. This is in this chapter 25, speaking to Devahuti, Satam prasangam mama vira samvido, bhavanti hritkana rasanaya gata, touch josarav sab, apavargo vartmani, shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishiti. There's a very famous verse, certainly in our Sangha anyway. Gurudev would say it often in his Mangalacharyan. And he would explain this verse deeply, because the last line is saying, Shraddha Ratir Bhakti Anukramishiti. He has described this as being sadhan bhakti, Shraddha, Bhav Bhakti, Ratir, and Prema Bhakti, that bhakti itself is Prema Bhakti. So he defines it in this way. And also Srila Gurudev has described the bhakti that the sadhak in Anugatya of the gopis is seeking in comparison to other types of bhakti. He starts by talking about the bhakti of Hanumanji. The bhakti of Hanumanji, a Premi Bhakti, is so high, but is it as high as the bhakti of the gopis? And then there's the bhakti of the Pandavas, Paraprem Bhakti. And then Uddhava, we discussed this yesterday, day before. These 5 types of bhakti. So then Gurudev will ask, what is the height of Uddhava's bhakti? And then in Braj itself, what is the height of the Sakha's bhakti? What is the height of Mother Yashoda's bhakti? What is the height of the gopis' bhakti? What is the height of those Swapaksh gopis under Sri Radha? What is the height of Chandravali and Radha's bhakti? And what is the height of Sri Radha's bhakti in comparison to all these other personalities? So we see that bhakti is by gradation. It's not just bhakti devotion is across the board. We can take the trouble to define it, to examine it, to take a microscope out and analyze that bhakti. This is very nourishing for the devotee's progress to see, because throughout the Bhagavatam, throughout the scriptures, it's referencing Mathuresh Krishna, Parthasarthi Krishna, Dwarkadish Krishna. What is the differences between this? And it seems like Gurudev gave his whole life to defining these differences. So for us, we should be grateful that we have this clear definition. Anya vilasita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. Anukulena Krishna Anushila Bhakti Uttama. What is Uttam Bhakti by Rupa Goswami? And then this is described as in the Anugatya of the gopis ultimately, because the gopis are pleasing Krishna the most. As we said yesterday, the gopis spend 12 hours every day. That Madhyana Lila, Ratri Lila, Nishanta Lila, what else? Prasprata, Purvana, those Leelas, Ratri and Madhyana Leela and Nishanta Leela, specifically, make 12 hours of the day. And for that much time, Krishna is directly, even though the Sakhas love Krishna so much, it's described that Sridham will cry at night, waiting for the night to finish, so again he can hold Krishna's hand. And Subal, he's praying to the moon to quickly finish your orbit, so again I will be with Krishna. They don't even want to take rest away from Krishna. How much do they love Krishna? And yet Krishna, he's receiving that anurag, that prem from the Sakhas, but still he leaves them every single day and goes to Radhakund in that Madhyana pastime, that Madhyana Leela. He walks behind a tree and they're all waiting for him to come back. And it seems like a matter of moments, and then Krishna steps out of the tree, but actually he's gone all the way to Radhakund and he's enjoyed with Radha for almost more than 3 hours. And then again he's coming, but they can practically not even live without him, and yet he leaves them. And his parents, Mother Yashoda, when Krishna finally leaves and goes to Mathura, Gurudev has described so many times how Mother Yashoda, she won't even cook, there's cobwebs everywhere, she hasn't even got any tears to weep. She's so bewildered in separation. He describes that beautiful pastime on a scorching summer day that she starts packing up a few of Krishna's things and she's going to start walking to Mathura. And the elderly gopi, "Oh, Mai, where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to take shelter and be as a maidservant of Devaki. And then I can see my Lala." So like this, we should appreciate that bhakti, but the bhakti of the gopis is our desire. So by this association, satam prasangam mama vira samvido, that... Sorry? Yes, yes. Yes. Even renouncing that. So what I'm trying to say, I'm talking about the gradations of bhakti. This is what we're seeing. And we understand the exalted bhakti of Braj, and we are relating it to these pastimes of Kapila Dev. I'm going to read the translation of this beautiful verse. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Lord is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. So this is the key that is also spoken in Jaivadhamma, that sadhu sangha, sharva shastra koi, labha matra sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. This association is principle. And how many times did we hear Gurudev encourage us towards this higher association? And association of the Bhagavatam. This is also Krishna. We can hear through these verses of the Bhagavatam. Then he's saying, thus, consciously engaged in devotional service, in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and the next, by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. So this control of the mind is what he's going to disseminate in his teaching to his mother about Sankhya philosophy. Now, Devahuti, she's inquiring further during this same chapter. She's saying, on hearing this statement of the Lord, Devahuti inquired, what kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service of your lotus feet? So she wants to know specifically. There are many types of devotional service, of bhakti. We've described a little bit of those different bhaktas, those 5 types of bhaktas. There are many types of seva that those bhaktas perform. Now she's asking, what is the best way? And then Kapila, with great happiness, he begins to describe this Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization as received by displic succession. Now, he begins to talk about the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods. So when the demigods are trying, we discussed already that the demigods were not unified in their creation of the world. They wanted to exert their control over the different limbs, but they couldn't do it unless they were collectively unified. And it was Krishna who created that unity amongst the devas. So again, Krishna is the, what you call, substratum. He's the platform. He's the basis for everything. This is the fundamental understanding that we must appreciate throughout everything, that he is the center. He is the attraction. What is life like in the spiritual world? We have heard that only Krishna is my thought, only pleasing Krishna. That is life in the spiritual world, in the spiritual reality. If we want to go to that place of consciousness, we must create that here, now, and put Krishna in the center entirely. And we can do it very easily when we understand scientifically that actually he is the center. Actually, it has all come from him. This is what Kapila Muni is going to explain in great scientific detail. But I'm not such a scientist, so I don't know if I can present it in the same way. All I can do is read these pages and hope that Indu will interpret it for us and give us it. So, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclinations is to work under direction of the Vedic injunctions. The senses themselves, and it's described that the soul itself likes to work under the Vedic injunctions. It's peaceful there, it's happy there. It's at, it feels that Krishna's embrace in that situation. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Lord. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Lord without any motive, that is far better than salvation. So salvation is something that perhaps the Sakam yogis are making these inquiries to achieve. It's like when we read this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, or rather the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself. For the first 1/3 of the explanations and verses, it's talking about the bliss of liberation. And then 1/3 of the way through, it starts to discuss the bliss of seva. It's a whole change in consciousness than when we're seeking our own pleasure, even in spiritual practice. Perhaps when we took to this path, this process, we wanted some bliss, some happiness, some like Brahman, Shanti type of realization. We want freedom from the suffering. We wanted salvation. Most people who come to this path are looking for that place. But then after some time and hearing the philosophy, then the personality of Krishna raises in our consciousness. And how can I please him? How can I serve him? How can I bring pleasure to him genuinely? And then all these instructions are all directed to that end. How to be respectful to devotees, how not to criticize devotees. That's not pleasing to Krishna. He's not pleased when we think in our very, exalted, judgmental states, well, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. But actually, what is pleasing to Krishna is to regard each other with the utmost respect for where we are. Now he's saying, bhakti devotional service dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort. That's very wonderful. What is the subtle body? Mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's the subtle body, right? So that is being dissolved. That tenacious hold to want to enjoy something in this material world is actually dissolved by devotional service. That's a miracle. Really, because we know how attached we are to our bodies, our sense of importance, our reputation, etc., etc. And yet by practicing devotional service, that will be dissolved. That's subtle. That's a great carrot to go for. Really. Just as fire in the stomach digests all we eat. What a perfect analogy. It could not be perfect. We don't think about the fire. It happens automatically. We eat and automatically it's digested. We don't think, well, I got to light the fire, get some, minerals and elements into my body quickly so I can digest this food, all right? Some people do if they don't have a good digestion. They have to take different things, But most times, if you're healthy, you don't need to make that extra effort. The fire of digestion works by itself. And similarly, this fire of devotion works by itself. It's a natural phenomena of the jiva, is to love Krishna. That's his natural state. We're bashing ourselves out trying to achieve bhakti, but actually it's the state of the jiva. It's the natural state of the jiva. But we've forgotten it because we're so conditioned, we're so covered over. And this phantom of being the controller, being the doer, being the one who is actually, responsible for the results of my actions. I'm going to work hard, I'm going to make this much money, or this and this and this. And I'm the one who's going to actually, this is called Aroha Panta. This is the ascending process. Our path is Avaroha Panta. the descending. We are always crying for mercy. Crying for mercy to Krishna. Nothing else we want. We only want the mercy of the Lord. The mercy of the Lord is so powerful enough to smash away all this ridiculous conditioning. When are we going to wake up and think that this conditioning is ridiculous? Only in the association of devotees, practicing devotees, that each day I'm in association of devotees, each day I'm interacting with different devotees, and each day something is being worn away from this harsh, false ego or conditioned self. The pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. So Krishna consciousness is a reality. That idea of trying to, what's the word? Superimpose, try to become Krishna. There's a word, I can't think of it. Is horrendous to the devotee who's actually witnessed something of Krishna's pastimes. When we go on parikram, and when we go under guidance of a Mahabhagavat, and he takes us to different holy places, practically the devotee can be lively aware of that pastime and Krishna's presence in those places. And we have these advantages living here in Braj. We can go to Vrindavan, we can go to Kalya Hrida, we can go to so many, and we can see those pastimes of Krishna. We can recognize that reality of Krishna, because it's not so easy to actually put Krishna in the front, because we've for so long put me in the front. This is what most of Prabhupada's teachings are about to the Western world, to try and purify this impersonal conception. He says, "O my mother, my devotees always see the smiling face of my form with eyes like the rising morning sun. They like to see my various transcendental forms, which are all benevolent, and they also talk favorably with me." And now there's a very beautiful description for many verses describing the form of the Lord. This form of the Lord is an Aishwarya form of the Lord. I'll just get to it. But nevertheless, it's extremely beautiful. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not in this chapter. No, he's not. It's in the next chapter that he's describing the form of the Lord. But here he continues to describe the 8 material perfections by mystic yoga that the bhakta no longer desires, because he's got an inkling of the sweetness and beauty. Everyone in this world wants love. There's no one who doesn't want that. This is what the heart is aching for. We misinterpret different objects perhaps as love, different relationships as love. It's the hankering, the heart wanting that embrace of Krishna directly. And we've said so many times that what is the symptom of that love? It's seva. So when we perform this seva, this devotional service, then that hole in the heart becomes fulfilled. That seva directly will fulfill that hankering, that desire of the heart to be loved and to love. This transcendental desire that the jiva has, actually the soul has. The soul, previously, before coming to this material world, in that Tatastha region, we were not aware of that. We were in that Brahman state, where there was just, actually, in a chapter that's we've gone past already, but Prabhupada at one point, he's describing the pralaya, and he describes how the jivas, during that time, they go into this, when the worlds are covered with water, there's profound silence, absolute silence, there's nothing. And sometimes for the conditioned soul, worrying in this world, that sounds quite attractive. But that has to be cut very quickly, because if we're attracted in that direction of that profound silence, because all the worlds are underwater, except Mahaloka, Janaloka and Satyaloka. They're above the Pralaya. And everything else, so there's no sound, because there's no manifestation of the elements. Sound is the first element. From sound is coming ether. So there's not even that for any sort of sound whatsoever. So that's a description that Prabhupada gives. So we were in that condition prior to coming here, to this noisy material world. But this noise has amongst it devotion. We have to actually seek the association of devotees. And in the association of devotees, many transitions will take place in the heart of the jiva. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself, for I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Lord, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. This is a very beautiful verse. It is because of my supremacy that the wind blows out of fear of me. The sun shines out of fear of me. And the Lord of clouds, Indra, sends forth showers out of fear of me. Fire burns out of fear of me. And death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. Fear we can interpret also as duty. Sometimes performing our duty is a sort of a fear. We perform our duty because we're fearful of breaking a dharmic principle or something. So these personalities, Vayudev, Suryadev, they are duty-bound to serve Krishna. So it's described here that it's out of fear of Krishna that they perform these activities. So, but we can also see in our own lives how much out of fear am I performing my activities. This is called Vaidhi Bhakti. And how much of Raganuga have I understood? Just because we talk about Raganuga doesn't mean that we're actually performing Raganuga. You know, it gets a little tedious sometimes, because some quite neophyte devotees sometimes think, because they've heard Gurudev say Raganuga, somebody, oh yes, I'm a Raganuga Bhakti. We are in process of trying to appreciate Rag Marg. But I am practicing like Raghunath Das so strictly. Can we just take one little leaf cup full of, buttermilk each day, as Raghunath does? Raghunath Das does. One little leaf cup. And yet he is so much on that highest rasic level. Can we perform pastimes? Are we so detached from this bodily conception? You know, we can talk rag marg, and then as soon as someone steps on our false ego, we want to battle with them immediately. You know, we see it, jump up, leap up in front of us, you know. Me? Something wrong with me? Oh my God. You know, this is so healthy for the devotee, actually. Therefore, persons whose minds are fixed on the Lord engage in intensive practice of devotional service. That is the only means for attainment of the final perfection of life. So that brings us to the end of the 25th chapter. So I was going to go through 3 other chapters today, and then there's another whole section after this. So I'm not going to complete this in 7 days at all. These teachings I can just whiz through, but what I just not able to do that. That's all. I don't know them enough, actually. If I was more familiar with these teachings, then perhaps I could synopsisize them and just flash through them and touch just on the essential points. But I'm not, so every day I have to study all these chapters very carefully and pull out what I think is completely relevant for us, because a lot of it is quite difficult, certainly in the next chapter, when it's describing the breakdown of the different elements and Sankhya philosophy. Anyway, tomorrow I will try and enter more into that Sankhya aspect of the philosophy. It begins to talk about, in this next chapter, the state of the characteristics, for example, of water. And then it talks about the characteristics of and functions of earth and of sky. All the different elements are described in fascinating, intense detail. And as I said previously, just knowing that all this knowledge, this amazing knowledge, is actually here on the pages of the Bhagavatam should give us great faith in this Bhagavatam, that nothing, no stone is left unturned, that it's all actually here on these pages. So tomorrow I'm going to go through something of the chapter 26 and 27 as much as I'm able tomorrow. So these classes normally begin at 8 o'clock and we finish at 9 o'clock. So I like to keep good timing. You have things to do, I have things to do also. So tomorrow we'll discuss this 26th chapter. Does anyone want to make any comments on anything at all? Or any questions on anything at all? We're trying to understand what is devotional service, how to help us perform our devotional service more focused, more pleasing to Krishna. What is going to please him? How can I please Krishna with the few remaining years left of my life? What can I do that is of value in this world and to myself without performing bhajan in my own practice? Then nothing will transpire. If it's only external, then that's a limited amount of progress I can make. But it has to be balanced with profound bhajan to be any sort of success. If we just run around preaching everywhere and making huge crowds of people, this is very pleasing, I'm sure, to the acharyas, but simultaneously, what is most pleasing, if one soul becomes absorbed in this Braja Leela that Gurudev has offered us. So that is our goal, to try and become absorbed in that will please him. Gurudev said many times, if I can make one person absorbed in what I am absorbed in, then I will consider my whole preaching efforts a success. So it's not always about numbers. It's about, our own development personally, and perhaps if we can share that with anyone. Okay? Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gold Premanandi. I thought it was going to get more technical today, but somehow it didn't. I steered away from it. I was afraid of that. But I'll have to face it sooner or later. I've been dreading these last chapters actually, because I was planning to come here and speak on this. And but they are absolutely beautiful. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Oh Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Oh Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
jai, Rupanuga Guru Varika ki jai, Shri Sachinandana Gaura Hari ki jai, Radha Gopinath Ju ki jai, Ananta Gaura Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari.